Okay, the next type we'll be talking about is the integer. An integer data type is a non-decimal number between -2 or between a negative value and a positive value of every kind. It's a data type of number that is not having any decimal point. What are the rules for integer? An integer must have at least one digit. An integer must not have a decimal point. An integer can either be positive or negative. And an integer can be specified in decimal, that is base 10, hexadecimal base 16, octal base 8, or binary base 2 notation. But it must not have a decimal point, and it can either be negative or positive value. The function variable dump or varchar or vardump is used to tell us exactly what type of integer we are dealing with or what type of data we are dealing with. If we bring this to our text editor to edit, let's go, and I clear out all this we've written, and I say we have x, which is 199, and we say var dump. You see, our suggestion is also doing that, var dump of x. We can come back to our browser and output that and see what it is. It's telling us that it's an int, right? So a var dump is the best way for us to output our data type to let us know what type of data type. Next, we'll be talking about the float. A float or floating point number is a number with a decimal point or a number in exponential form. The following example is an example of a float, and the PHP variable dump function returns the value of the data type and the value. So if we have another one, let's come back. We have, let's say we put a decimal point here, and we come and output it out. We can see the floating point is giving it to the nearest zillions of thousands of decimal points, of decimal places. So a float saves in decimal place. Okay. Now we have the boolean. The boolean represents two possible states, true or false. Booleans are often used in conditional testing if it's true and false. So for boolean, they don't really store much information except for the values of things to be true and false. You can say if. They are used in conditional testing. Conditional testing are statements that comes with if and else. So you say if that is true, but if it's false, it echoes out that is false. Arrays. An array is something like a container or a box for housing multiple values in a single variable. Example below, we have a variable of cars which stores an array of types of cars. We have Volvo, BMW, and Toyota. If we use the variable dump to explain out or to echo out or to print out the cars, we can see what is going to be. Array have more complex usage and we discussed in a later chapter. But let us go to our text editor and see what this is going to give us. Alright, now we are back in our text editor and we've written out the array. Now let's go ahead to our browser and output it and see what it's going to do. Now it's telling you that the array, or it's an array, and it has 3 elements in it, and it's telling us for arrays are usually counted in the -1 index. So the first element in the array is seen as 0, and it's telling you that the first element is a string that has 5 letters and it's Volvo. It's telling us that the second array, which is the array with index of 1, is also a string with 3 characters, which is BMW. And the third one, which is actually the index 2, is also a string of 6 characters with the name Toyota. So variable dump is a very good way to show us what type of data we are dealing with. Now we have the null. A null is a special data type which can have only one value, null. A variable of data type null is a variable that has no value assigned to it. Note that null and 0 are not the same thing. So if you assign a value to 0, doesn't mean the value is empty. If you assign a value to empty or a variable to empty, it doesn't also mean the value is empty. The only way you can set a value to empty, to completely empty, is by making it null. If you go ahead and see the example below, let's try our hands on it and see what we have. Alright, so we have it in our text editor now, and we can go ahead to our browser and see what it's going to give us. Reload it, see null. Null means it is empty. Objects and resource. Objects, classes and objects are two main aspects of object-oriented programming. A class is a template for objects, and an object is an instance of a class. When the individual objects are created, they inherit all the properties and behavior from the class, but each object will have different values for the properties. Objects and classes and resources will be dealt with in a later chapter as we progress in the course. But I want you to understand the different data types we have now. We have the string data for storing text or character text. We have the integer data type for storing numbers that are positive, negative, and not having a decimal point. We have the float for storing numbers with decimal point. We have the boolean, who can have a value of 2, true or false. We have the arrays, which are containers that can store multiple variables in one variable. And we also have our objects and resource, which can be used to store classes and for use in more object-oriented programming. Now, this brings us to our next lesson. Hello everyone, welcome. We'll be talking about string functions here. For an operation of a string, there are multiple things that can be done on it, ranging from getting the number of words in a string, number of letters in a string, the position of a particular number or position of a particular alphabet in a string, replacing and searching for values in a string, and so much more can be done with the string function. Now, the first thing we're going to be checking is the string length. The PHP string length function returns the length of a string. That is, if we have a string length, a word with hello world, and we use the string length function on it, we have the output of 12. We also talk about the word count. In PHP, word count functions count the number of words in a string. Let's go ahead and show you what they look like. Alright, so we are back to our editor and we have the string length function with our x and the string word count with our x also. Now we head over to our browser and refresh. We have that we're having 16 and 2. Okay, I didn't add a break. So if I'm to echo a break tag, and we have that the first one, the string length is 16 words and the string word count is 2 words. Hello world is 2 words. The next one we have string reverse. The string reverse function displays a string in the reverse order. We have the string position. The string position function searches for a specific text within a string. If a match is found, this function returns the character position of the first match. If no match is found, it returns false. That is, we say for hello world, we can search for the position of world in the string. Let's go ahead to the browser or to our text editor and see what that looks like. Okay, now we are back to our text editor. I have a variable here of x which says hello everyone, I am a backend developer at UDevop. Now we are going to do both for the string reverse and we're also going to do for the string positioning. So to make it easy, let me add a few text to it. Say so we know which of the function it is. Then we copy it so as to know the string post function. Okay, so we go ahead to our browser and we reload, and we have the string reverse for the string reverse function. We have it reversing hello everyone, I am retrieved from behind. And now we're going for the string post function we have in 23. So it's telling us that the variable for backend was found on the number 23. If we go back to our variable and count it, we can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. So backend started from the number of 23. So that is why we can see that it's written at 23 as the output. Now we also have another function here called string replace. String replace replaces some characters with some other characters in a string. That is quite simple. We have string irrepose. The string repose function find the position of the last occurrence of a string inside another string. That is, the syntax is to find the last occurrence of a string inside another string. Alright, so let's go back to our text editor and see how that works. So now we have the string replace function here, and we have the string replace function, string replace, mispace it, and for string replace it takes 3 parameters. The first one is what we are searching for, the second one is what we want to replace it with, and the third one is the variable we want to perform the operation on. So if we go ahead and save it, I head straight to our browser and reload, we have everyone, I'm a full stack developer at UDevop. Now the backend we have here initially has been replaced by the full stack we have here, so it can display now that I am a full stack developer at UDevop. Okay, coming back here, for the string irrepose, we said the function finds the position of the last occurrence of a string inside another string. I'll be giving you that as an homework to find out how this can be used on your own. Now we have the substring. The substring function returns a part of a string. It has the syntax substring, the string, the start, and the length. We are going to be using these following strings to echo out and see what we have from each different one. Line here, which is hello world, and we are having the starting. So what the substring does is it takes a part of a code and it looks or counts from the number of letters. Now the first one example here is saying if you have a word hello world, if you have a statement as hello world, it's going to count 10 places from the beginning of the word. If you have hello, it's going to count just one, it's going to remove one word from it. Minus says it's going to start removing from behind. Minus 8 means also it's going to remove 8 numbers or 8 letters from behind. Then we have the second one. We can use the start and the length parameters with different positive and negative numbers. You can tell it where to start counting from and where to count to. So for this one with 0, it means be in 0. 0 means start from the beginning and move 10 places into the writing. This one says start from the 6th character and move 6 places forward. This one starts from 0 and move -1 place, that is start counting from behind. This one is 0 and also to start counting from behind. So let us go to the browser and see, but before we do that, let me echo hello world here so we can easily trace the number to see how we are doing. Okay, let me add a double break so we can significantly see the difference. So if we reload the browser, we have our hello world here as our baseline, and the first one says what? The first one says hello world 10 places. So if we go back to our browser, we can see from our hello world counting 10 numbers, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We can see that the next thing is we're only left with D and exclamation, and that's what we have here. The second one says what? We should count one place. So one place, we're only removing the H. That's why we have the other hello world, and so on and so forth. -4 means start counting from behind. It's going to remove every other thing else and leave only the 4 that it counts from behind. The same thing for -8 means it's going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and delete every other thing in front. Note that every character in PHP is counted. Even a space in PHP also has a significant value and is counted. It's not an empty space, but it's a value of empty. So every string or every space in PHP is always counted. Okay, so before we call this a wrap, we are going to talk about this last part, which talks about the starting length and the start and the length of a parameters with different positive and negative integers or numbers. Now we are having this word hello world here. We are telling this to start from 0 and count to 10. We're also telling this to start from the 6th number and count to 6 places. Also, let's see what it looks like in the browser. If we reload the browser, we can see asking it to start from 0 and count 10 places forward means starting your number from 0. So let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it's telling you that leave only these 10 things, start from 0 and count just 10 places, deleting every other thing that is left. So we're having hello world. The same thing, start from the 6th and delete every other thing that is left. So started from the 6th place means starting from the 6th and count just 6 places. It means we're starting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we are going to start from this, counting 6 places. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So nothing is left to delete. So that's why we still have our world displayed. So the same thing. So you can play around it and see how far it gets you and see what you can come out with it. Write a number, put in the counting spaces, and understand better how the string function with substrings work. See you in the next video. Okay, now welcome back. In our last tutorial, we talked about string functions and how to perform some operations on strings like string position, string replace, string substring, and a whole lot more, which will be discussed later. For this tutorial, I'll be teaching you about numbers. What are numbers? We know numbers are the unit of counting or measuration. Now in PHP also, PHP has a function to deal with numbers, and we know that numbers exist in form of integers or floats. Floats can also be called decimal because it allows for decimal points. Now, PHP provides automatic data type conversion. If you assign an integer value to a variable, the type of that variable will automatically become an integer. Then if you assign a string to the same variable, the type will change to a string. What is this trying to say? If we have given an integer here, and let's say y equals to, and we put it here, 1000. If I come and say variable dump x, echo have a break and variable dump y. Let's go ahead and echo this in our browser and see what we have here. If we echo it out, we can see that it's saying the first one is an integer while the second one is a string. That means like this: a variable x with 1000 and a variable y inside quote of 1000, and we give the variable dump of each. If you come to our browser and reload this, we have this. It's saying that the first one is seen as an integer while the second one is seen as a string with 4 characters in it. So we should be very careful whenever we are writing an integer. We have to ensure it is written as an integer and a string is written as a string. Example of numbers discussed are integers, float, infinity, NaN, numerical string, casting strings, and float to integers. An integer is a number without any decimal point. It can exist from negative to positive. Another important thing to know is that even if 4 times 2.5 equals to 10, the result is stored as float because one of the operands is a float. That is to say, even if we are having an operation where we multiply a float and an integer and the value given finally is an integer, it still records as a float. This is because once a float has been included in the function or the operation, it automatically sees the result as a float. Now here are some rules for integers. An integer must have at least 1 digit. An integer must not have a decimal point. An integer can either be positive or negative. Integers can be specific in 3 formats, which is decimal, base 10, hexadecimal, base 16, and octal. Integers. We have some functions for integers, like we have the isInt, which is to show that is this an integer, which is to verify whether it's an integer or not. We have this example below. I will be checking it to see what the output is going to be. So we'll go back to our text editor. Let's say I comment this one out because we don't need it, and I have another variable, say z. I have this, so I can come out and say come here and replace this and say is int of z. We want to verify if this is going to be seen as an int and if this is also going to be seen as an int. If you come back to our browser and we reload this, we see the first one says, is it an int? It is true. But the second one said, is it an int? It is false because the value of that is not an integer but a float. We also have floating numbers. A float is a number with a decimal point or a number in exponential form. We have the various categories or types in which it can be. And now we note that the float data type can commonly store a value of up to this value. That's a very large kind of value and has a maximum precision of 40 digits. PHP has the following predefined constant for floats. From PHP 7.2 upward, we have PHP float max, the largest representable floating point number, PHP float min, the smallest representable positive floating point number, float dig, and float epsilon, the smallest representative positive number x, so that x plus 1.0 epsilon is equals to 1.0. Well, all these functions might not be needed now. They are just for noting them down. They might not be used soon, but just note them down. Float has the following function to check if the type of variable is float. we have is float or is double. Is double can also be said as is float. So just like we have to verify for the integer, we also have to verify for this. So let's go back to our text editor and try that out. If we comment this guy out and we comment, I'll also comment this out, we have is float. So I want to verify, is it a float? Go back to our browser, reload. It is true, it's a float. So we are there, that's that for that. Now we have another type, infinite. A numerical value that is larger than the PHP float maximum is considered an infinite. An infinite is a number that exceeds the number or the maximum number of what PHP can accept. We have the other one, NaN, not a number. NaN stands for a not a number and is used for impossible mathematical operations. Like is to say, if we are given some mathematical operations that does not exist, it's going to assume it is not a number. Like if you are going to be given a cos 8 like this, let's go ahead and try it in our text editor. Okay, so we'll come back to our browser and to our text editor. I mean, we have a cos 8. Let's say a cos is just a mathematical function, and we have a variable dump for x. For x. I'll come back to our browser and reload. It says it's a float, but it's not a number. Alright? Okay, so we have that for that. Then we have numerical strings. In PHP, numerical string function can be used to find whether a variable is numerical. That is, we are given a variable and we don't know what form it comes in. We can use its numerical function to determine whether the entry given by the user is a numerical number or not a numerical number. As we progress, we'll be seeing, once we are done with all these basic functions, we'll be going deep into having our software ready, where that will be building some software or will be building some applications that you can use with real life PHP and see how it functions properly. So for this one, just let's go. So we have the following ones. We have variable dump is numerical, variable dump is numerical, variable dump is numerical for this. Now this, I'm going to leave this as an assignment for you. Go ahead, do it, check it to see if your value is going to be numerical. Mind you, the result is going to come out as either true or false. So you get it and you see that. Now we are coming to casting strings and float to integers. Sometimes you need to cast a numerical value into another data type. The integer or intval functions are often used to convert a value to an integer. Let's say we have a value that is not an integer or a string. It can be used to convert Let's say we have a value that is a string. We can use it to convert it to an integer. So if we have it this way, let's go ahead and see what it's going to look like. Okay, we're coming back to our text editor now, and we have it already written. We have a variable with an integer, then we have a cast value. Is we're going to see if it's going to cast this into an int, and we have this also in a string format, and we're going to give it cast. I'm giving it caster because we've already used cast here and we can't call it twice with the same variable name. So we want to see how this comes out in our browser. Loading it, and we'll see that both are given out as an integer. If we go ahead to want to make this, we can say var dump just to verify if we are actually right. Var dump and see what we are going to get. We see that it's given both as integers. It's saying this is both int, but mind you, the first initially written one is given as string. If I have to say, let me copy this break and add it here and ask you to say a variable dump of y. We have it as, it's telling you that y is a string, but because we've casted it and changed the int type to int, it is now reading it as an int. So it's very okay if we have a value that is coming in. Let us say this often occurs when people are to fill a form or fill something and they are writing it as a string, or we can use it to convert it to an integer, or we can convert back from integer to strings. Now we have the math functions. There are some functions that are embedded in PHP that are mathematical functions. We have the pi function, we have the min, we have the max, we have the abs, we have the square root function. Now the pi function, it returns the value of pi, 3.14, and the decimal places of pi. We have the min and the max, which helps us to determine which number is the minimum and which is the maximum in a given set of arrays. We have this is used to, the ABS function, this is used to find the lowest or highest value in a list of arguments. The square root also, this returns the square root of a number. If you have a square root of 64, it's going to return 8. You can go ahead and practice this together. We also have the round function. It rounds up the number to the nearest whole number. Just as we know, we have rand. Rand also displays a list of random numbers. You can add the option min and max parameter to specify the lowest integer and highest integer to be returned. If you want to use a rand, for rand, you can put it in, give it an argument for this is representing the lowest and this is representing the highest. So what it does is it generates a number between 10 and 10,000. So I'm going to give you as an assignment to go ahead and play with all these things and see what it gives you.